My name is Alison Kate, and I'm 29 years old. I grew up in Greystone Hollow, a dusty little town outside Cedar Ridge, Virginia, where women were expected to smile more than they spoke and park around the back, even if they owned the car outright. My father ran a small repair garage, barely enough to keep the lights on, but he loved every bolt and gasket like it was family. When I was 16, he taught me how to rebuild a carburetor with grease on my hands and a grin on my face. Engines don't lie, he'd say. People will, but not machines. He died before I turned 20, and with him went the last man who believed in me without question. By 22, I had opened a small auto repair stall under the awning of my uncle's barn. I charged less than the big boys in town and worked twice as hard. Word spread. By 25, I was running the most trusted garage in 3 counties, but I was still the girl mechanic to most folks. And to men like Clayton Harlow, that meant nothing at all. Clayton ran Harlow Motors, the most prestigious car dealership in Lexington Creek. Polished tiles, crystal showroom, cars that gleamed like chrome candy. He sold dreams and judged by heels. I first met him when I came to test drive a vintage 1928 Packard 8, just one of 5 ever restored in state. I had saved for 2 years, took loans, sold my trailer, and borrowed from my cousin just to make the down payment. As I walked in wearing denim, grease-stained boots, and a thick braid swinging behind me, 3 salesmen looked me over and didn't even rise from their seats. Clayton himself came out, hands stuffed in his pockets, with a crooked smirk that reeked of arrogance. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, already assuming I was lost. "I have a meeting with your sales director." About the Packard. He raised an eyebrow, then said something I'll never forget. "Ma'am, our luxury clients park in the front. Guests like yourself, staff or vendors, use the side lot." He didn't even bother to check my name. I walked back out, heat flooding my ears. I wasn't just dismissed, I was erased. When I finally got to the side lot and found the Packard, another man in a tailored suit was already being handed the keys. I watched him climb in, no questions asked. My appointment had been canceled the moment I didn't look like I belonged. That night, I didn't cry. I wrote down every word Clayton had said, every glance, every whisper. I burned the humiliation into memory, not for pity, for fuel. Because something shifted inside me that night, not just rage, resolve. I decided I'd never park outside again. I wanted more than a seat at their table. I wanted the whole damn building. So I started planning. I called in favors, reached out to the clients I'd earned from Greystone Hollow to Cedar Ridge, folks who trusted me more than any man in a press jacket. Then I called Benjamin Locke, a wealthy antique car broker in Charlottesville whose Bentley I once rebuilt with my bare hands. I told him I had a dream and I needed backing. He said just 6 words, "Send me the numbers." I'm in. Within 6 months, I'd saved enough to make an offer no dealership could ignore, especially one in quiet financial trouble. Because, you see, Harlow Motors wasn't as shiny as it looked. Clayton had debts, lawsuits from 3 states. His showroom was all glass, but his books were full of cracks, and I had seen them, because while they were mocking my boots and my braid, I was quietly watching their walls fall. By October, my offer had gone through a shell buyer, quiet, clean, discreet. Nobody knew, not yet, but I did, and I smiled every night thinking about how I would walk into that dealership again this time. Not to buy a car, but to own every single one of them. And I'd wait until Christmas Eve, because nothing tastes sweeter than revenge. With a red ribbon on top, by mid-October, the leaves had turned a deep rust red in Lexington Creek, and my plan was already in motion, quiet, legal, and exact. The dealership's official buyer on record was a Virginia holding company named Foxgrove Enterprises, one of several shell corporations managed by Benjamin Locke's firm. I wasn't just going to own Harlow Motors. I was going to take it apart and rebuild it on my terms without ever lifting a wrench. I had spent the last 3 months gathering documents, lining up contractors, and meeting with Benjamin's lawyers under the radar. In public, I still wore my oil-stained coveralls, still took jobs changing carburetors, still waved politely when Clayton's boys drove by in their silk vests and smirks, but behind closed doors, I was the architect of their downfall. The purchase would be finalized on December 20th, just days before Christmas. That date wasn't random, it was personal. 1 year to the day from when my loan request for a small expansion garage had been denied by Clayton's financial officer with a note scribbled in the margin. No commercial collateral. Female owned. Not a priority. That note still sat in my drawer like a matchstick waiting to be struck. Benjamin's lawyers made sure the sale stayed airtight. They even arranged a confidentiality clause that barred the seller Clayton from knowing the buyer's identity until the ink was dry. It was common in businesses at risk of collapse. And Clayton, as expected, didn't question the terms. He needed the money too badly. While he played golf and pretended his empire was safe, I studied every inch of it. Harlow Motors had 23 employees, all men. Not one woman in upper management, not one female mechanic. Their sales team routinely turned away women unless they arrived on the arm of a husband or wore pearls. Their books were a mess soaked in unnecessary expenses, inflated executive bonuses, and shady side deals with shipping companies in South Carolina. No one questioned it because no one thought a woman from Greystone Hollow could ever see inside their fortress. But I did. I knew the system because I'd lived beneath it, and now I was standing above it. On November 12th, I made my first silent visit to the dealership, not through the front entrance, but disguised as a cleaning crew supervisor with a clipboard and borrowed boots. I walked those polished halls with a fake badge and memorized every smug face that once looked past me. I saw the sales floor, the service center, the same break room where one of Clayton's salesmen had once said, "Women just don't understand cars unless they're painted pink." I smiled and walked on. In my mind, I already knew where I'd hang the new company plaque. I already knew which employees would be escorted out. I had names on a list, not out of cruelty but consequence. Some debts aren't owed in dollars. They're owed in dignity. On December 1st, Benjamin sent word that the final bank transfer was cleared. The keys would be handed over on the morning of December 21 Street. I had only one request left to make. I called a local seamstress in Cedar Ridge, Miss Bernadette Sharp, who had stitched my overalls since I was 16, and asked her to sew me something special. A dress? She asked. No, I said. A red wool coat. Something warm. Something that stands out. She delivered it in a plain brown box on December 15th. I didn't try it on. Not yet. On December 20th, as the snow began to drift across the hills of Greystone Hollow, I stood at the grave of my father, wearing my old leather gloves and boots. I rested a single silver key on the stone. Tomorrow, I take it back, I whispered. For every woman they laughed at, for every loan they denied, for every time they told us to park outside. The wind howled through the orchard trees nearby, but I didn't flinch. Revenge wasn't a fire inside me anymore. It had become something colder, sharper. I wasn't coming for their permission. I was coming for their power, and I would arrive in red. The morning of December 21st arrived with a heavy snowfall that covered the town like a clean sheet waiting to be written on. I stood outside Harlow Motors, wrapped in my new red wool coat, snowflakes collecting on my shoulders, my breath steady. In the cold, I hadn't slept all night, but my eyes were sharp just like the blade of justice. I was about to drive straight through the belly of a corrupt, arrogant machine. Inside those glass walls, Clayton Harlow stood with 2 lawyers and a cigar pressed between his fingers like he'd just sold the crown jewels. He didn't recognize me through the frosted windows. Just as well. At 9 o'clock a.m. sharp, I stepped through the dealership's glass doors and into the same marble-floored showroom that once treated me like dust on its boots. This time, I didn't wait for anyone to greet me. The receptionist, a young man in a navy vest, looked up. "Ma'am, you'll need to," but before he could finish, Benjamin Locke walked in behind me, briefcase in hand, his voice cool and cutting. "She doesn't need anything. This is Alison Kate. As of this morning, she owns this building, this business, and every vehicle parked within 10 yards of this address." The boy blinked. In the showroom, Clayton turned, his face twisted first in confusion then shock. "Her?" he barked, stepping forward. "You sold my dealership to her?" Benjamin didn't flinch. "No, Clayton. You sold your dealership to a holding company. That holding company belongs to Alison." Clayton looked at me like he had just swallowed motor oil. "This has to be a mistake. She's not even a mechanic?" I stepped closer. "A woman? Someone you told to park in the back?" I paused. "No mistake, Clayton. Just memory." He looked like he might explode. "You little careful," I said, calm as ice. "You're talking to the only person keeping you from being thrown out today, instead of tomorrow." He sputtered, red-faced, but one of Benjamin's lawyers handed him a thick folder with final signatures and transfer receipts. It was done. Legally, irrevocably. The staff began to gather around, murmuring, unsure what they were witnessing. I turned toward them 24 men in suits, half of whom wouldn't make eye contact. Some I remembered by face, others by file. But all of them had played a part in building the culture that drove women like me away from this industry. So I stepped up to the display stage where the Packard 8 still sat gleaming beneath the showroom lights. I climbed up, pulled the microphone from its stand and spoke. "Good morning," I began. "My name is Alison Kate. I'm 29 years old. I'm from Greystone Hollow. And as of this moment, I own Harlow Motors." Dead silence. "You may be wondering what this means for all of you," I continued, voice steady. "Some of you will keep your jobs, others will not. Because this dealership is no longer a boys' club dressed up as a business. It is a company, now rooted in merit, respect, and accountability." I let the words hang. To those of you who treated female clients like fools, to those who mocked working-class customers, to the men who told women they needed a husband's approval to test drive a car, you're done. I handed Benjamin a list. "These employees are to be dismissed immediately." Gasps. Clayton tried to lunge toward me, but 2 security officers hired in advance stepped in. "You can't do this," he barked. "You don't have the right." "I do," I replied. "You signed it away, for a price you didn't question, because you never thought someone like me could hold a pen." He stared, breath shallow, as if the walls around him had suddenly turned into mirrors, and maybe in a way they had. I stepped down from the platform and walked past him, slow, steady, deliberate. When I reached the receptionist's desk, I turned and added, "Oh, and by the way, the parking lot out front, it's for everyone now." I smiled, even girls in work boots. The first 48 hours after I took over Harlow Motors were quiet but thick with tension. Clayton and the other dismissed employees were gone by nightfall. Their desks were cleaned, keys collected, and names removed from all rosters. But the rest of the staff didn't know what to make of me. They walked on eggshells, barely speaking unless spoken to. I could feel their eyes when my back was turned. Some of them, I think, were waiting for me to fall. That was fine. Let them watch, because I wasn't here to be liked. I was here to rewrite the rules. The next morning, I gathered the remaining staff in the showroom. I stood again beneath the glow of the chandelier they'd once bought for clients who arrived in furs and silence. "I'm not Clayton," I began. "I'm not here to play favorites or throw dinners for county club members." I looked them each in the eye. "But I know this. If you do honest work, I will have your back. I will pay fair, promote fair, and protect fair. But the old ways, those days are done. If you ever belittle a woman again in this showroom, I won't fire you quietly. I'll make sure every dealership in the state knows exactly why you're gone." A few men nodded. A few lowered their heads. 1 or 2 walked out. Let them be. Why? The third day, I met with Harriet Boone, a local accountant I trusted from Cedar Ridge. I had her run a full audit of the company's books. It was worse than I expected. Over $240,000 spent on networking retreats to luxury cabins in the Blue Ridge Mountains, all expensed under employee development. 3 staff vehicles leased for salesmen's wives. Thousands funneled through side contracts to Clayton's cousin's printing company for brochures we never needed. Harriet looked up at me from the pile of receipts. "You want to burn it all down or fix it?" I smiled. "Both, but I'll start with fixing." That same afternoon, I changed the dealership's name. No more Harlow Motors. The new sign went up just after dusk in gold embossed letters: Ironwood Auto and Classic Motors, a name that meant something strong, rooted, and absolutely mine. The next battle? Culture. I hired 2 female mechanics from nearby towns. One, Lena Ashcroft, had been dismissed from her last job after a manager told her, "You're too pretty to be under a hood." The other, Maria Jennings, had been rebuilding transmissions in her dad's garage since she was 12 and could quote engine manuals like poetry. When Lena walked into the service bay on her first morning, one of the old-timers scoffed. "Hope you're not afraid of breaking a nail." Lena didn't say a word. She just slid under a Mustang GT and replaced a faulty clutch in 26 minutes flat. The man shut up real fast. I watched from my office, hiding a grin. But not everyone fell in line so easily. That Friday, I found a note taped to my office door. No name, just thick black ink. "You don't belong here. You got lucky. It won't last." I didn't flinch. I folded the note, placed it in a drawer, and typed up 2 things: a dealership-wide memo implementing zero-tolerance policies for harassment, A recruitment ad for female trainees interested in automotive sales, offering mentorship and full pay. I hung the flyer in every county bulletin board between Lexington Creek and Asheville.by the second week. Customers started to notice the change. Women came in alone, with confidence. Farmers brought in trucks without judgment. The sales team started listening more than talking. One day, an elderly woman in a plaid coat came in and stared up at the new sign. She turned to me and said, "I remember when that man Clayton told me I needed my son's approval to co-sign. I'm glad he's gone." I smiled. "He didn't leave," I said. "He was replaced." She looked at me. "Bayou?" "Yes, ma'am," she chuckled. "It's about damn time." Still, every night when I locked the doors, I felt the tension lingering, a weight in the walls. Like not everyone had accepted what had happened. Like someone was waiting for the right moment to take a swing back, and part of me welcomed it, because I hadn't fought my way up to be afraid of shadows. Let them come. I wasn't done yet. The first Monday of the new year brought ice storms and tension both thick and slow to melt. Though the showroom glistened and the new nameplate gleamed under a fresh spotlight, something darker began to creep through the cracks of ironwood. Auto.id started with little things. A customer order for a 1932 Auburn Speedster was misplaced. A parts delivery was rerouted to the wrong town twice. Phone messages went mysteriously missing. Appointments were rescheduled without being recorded. At first, I chalked it up to growing pains. After all, transitions bring confusion. New systems, new staff, old habits clashing with fresh ones. But my gut told me different. By week's end, Harriet the accountant pulled me into the back office. "Someone inside is working against you," she said, sliding a file across the desk. Inside were printouts of emails, internal memos, and inventory logs altered, redacted, or deliberately sabotaged. Nothing criminal, but definitely calculated. "Who?" I asked. Harriet tapped her pen. "You've got a rat, and I think they want you to panic." I didn't. I plotted. The next morning, I walked into the staff meeting early, coffee in hand, coat still wet with snow. Everyone looked up, some with guilt, others with empty faces. I gave them a calm smile. "Starting today," I announced, "all transactions will be logged twice, once on paper, once by digital confirmation. Every employee will sign off on their department's end of day reports." A few groaned. One rolled his eyes, and I added, "We'll be bringing in a third-party auditor once a month. No exceptions, no excuses." There were grumbles, but I didn't care. If they wanted to test me, they'd learn I didn't bluff. Later that afternoon, Lena, our new female mechanic, found a lug nut intentionally loosened on a customer's truck. Had she not double-checked it before release, the vehicle could have crashed halfway down Route 19. She brought the part to me, shaking. "This wasn't a mistake," she whispered. "Someone's trying to cause trouble." I looked her dead in the eye. Not for long. That night, I stayed in my office past 10. Everyone had gone home. The snow fell hard outside, muffling the world. I walked the showroom floor alone, turning off lights. But just as I neared the back corridor, I heard the faint click of a side door shutting. Too late for deliveries. Too late for anyone to be forgetting something. I followed the sound. Quiet, careful, through the service bay, past the old tire racks. I saw a figure slip into the break room. I crept up, boots soft on the tile. Inside, Chad Holloway, a junior salesman who had once flirted with every woman who entered the dealership, was hunched over the staff computer. A flash drive hung from the port. He didn't hear me until I turned on the light. He froze. Well, I said softly. "Burning the midnight oil, are we?" He jumped back, stammering. I was just trying to delete records." I crossed my arms. "Forge some quotes? Maybe scramble a few customer profiles before the audit hits next week?" His face turned ghostly pale. "You don't belong here," he spat suddenly. "You made this place a circus, fired good men, turned it into some kind of feminist garage." I stepped forward slowly. "I didn't fire men, Chad. I fired dead weight, and I'll do it again." He lunged to yank out the flash drive, but I beat him to it, snatched it from the port, held it up like a trophy. "You know," I said calmly, "your cousin worked at a dealership in Westport last year. Got caught stealing client info." "Say memo." Chad's face crumpled. "You think because you wear a suit, no one will notice a snake under it?" The next morning, I had security escort him out, Publicly, I stood at the front doors as they walked him past the holiday wreaths, now browned and brittle. This is what happens when you try to sabotage a woman who's already lived through worse. I called out. And no one clapped. No one needed to. The silence was louder than any applause. That week, productivity doubled. Staff started showing up early. Customers came back, some just to see if the rumors were true. They were. Ironwood Auto wasn't just surviving. IT was finally thriving, but I still wasn't done. There was one last thread from the past still dangling. One man who had walked away without ever looking back, Clayton Harlow, and I'd just found out where he'd landed next. 3 weeks had passed since I had Chad Holloway walked out with snow crunching under his leather soles and pride trailing behind him. It felt like progress. But as with all wars, when one enemy falls, another rises. It was Harriet, again, who brought me the news. She knocked on my office door just before noon, holding a folded page from the Lexington Creek Ledger. "Thought you'd want to see this," she said. The headline read, "Former dealership giant Clayton Harlow launches new luxury auto lounge in Glenwood County." Below it was a glossy photo of Clayton, now clean-shaven, with his trademark smug smirk, shaking hands with a local banker under a banner that read, "Grand Opening, Harlow & Co." I stared at the headline, not blinking. Beneath the photo, the article explained that Clayton had partnered with investors to open a dealership that catered exclusively to male professionals, collectors, and executives. Women weren't even mentioned. "He's calling it an automotive gentleman's club," Harriet said. "Drinks, cigars, velvet lounges, and vintage cars sold by invitation only." I placed the paper down slowly. "He's trying to rebuild what I took from him." Harriet nodded. "Only with deeper pockets this time." I sat back in my chair, the wheels already turning. Clayton hadn't learned a thing. He didn't just want to compete. He wanted to erase me from the market, reclaim the title, restore the old ways in a shinier shell. But I knew something about predators like Clayton. They only thrive when people stay quiet. So I didn't. I began planning my next move, not in fury, but with the same precision I'd used from the start. First, I asked Harriet to quietly pull county property records and investment partner names tied to Harlow & Co. I wanted to know who backed him, why, what their weaknesses were. Next, I contacted Vivian Graves, a well-known auto columnist from Richmond, who'd once interviewed me when I rebuilt a rare Duesenberg engine solo. Vivian still remembered me. "I've heard whispers about Harlow's new gentleman-only palace," she said. "I didn't want to touch it without proof." "You'll get proof," I promised. Within days, I sent her photographs and transcripts from women who'd tried to walk into the showroom only to be turned away. One woman, Rebecca Flynn, told Vivian, a salesman literally told her, "We only host serious buyers. This isn't a beauty parlor." Vivian published her article in the Richmond Herald 3 days later, "Exclusion in Chrome." Inside the gender divide at Harlow & Co., the story exploded. Radio shows picked it up. Female driving clubs started campaigns. By week's end, the National Auto Dealers Guild was looking into Clayton's hiring practices. I wasn't finished. I knew that a frontal attack wasn't enough. I needed to starve him from the inside. So I called up one of his known investors, Dean Foster, a conservative banker from Roanoke, whose reputation meant more to him than any dollar. I didn't threaten. I simply asked, "Dean, do you want to be the man backing a business that turns away mothers, teachers, and nurses because they don't wear TIs?" By Friday, Dean had quietly pulled out his funding. Clayton didn't see it coming. On Monday morning, a box was delivered to my office. No note, no label, just a red satin ribbon around a single golden gearshift knob. I knew immediately it was from him. A warning, an insult, a reminder. I placed the knob on my shelf beside the old flash drive I'd taken from Chad, and my father's wrench, still stained with the oil of a 1970 Mustang, war trophies. That night, I held a meeting with Lena Maria Harriet and our top female sales trainee, June Thomas, a single mother from Buchanan who had outsold every male rep 2 weeks in a row. "We're not going to fight like them," I said. "We're going to rise." I announced a new initiative, Drive Her Forward, a monthly free automotive workshop for women and girls in the community. Oil checks, tire rotations, basic engine care, all taught by our staff, led by women. We launched it on the first Saturday of February. 43 women came. By the end of the month, we were featured in a national magazine under the headline, "The Woman Who Took a Dealership and Made It a Movement." Meanwhile, Clayton's velvet showroom sat half empty, collecting silence. But I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't go down without a fight, and Christmas was just around the corner again. I had a feeling he was planning something big. What he didn't know was, so was I. By the second week of December, I could feel something coming. Not just in the air, though the snow clung to the branches like dusted lace, but in the way Clayton Harlow had gone quiet, too quiet. His velvet slick operation in Glenwood County, once booming with promise, had begun to unravel. Between the bad press, public protests, and withdrawal of investor funds, Harlow & Co. had turned into a fragile trophy with cracked foundations. Still, I knew Clayton wouldn't bow out. Not a man like him. I expected a statement. He gave me a show. On December 16th, just 9 days before Christmas, an invitation was hand-delivered to Ironwood Auto, sealed in red wax with an engraved CAH on the back. I opened it in my office, Harriet and Lena both standing nearby. Miss Kate, in the spirit of holiday reconciliation and healthy competition, I cordially invite you to the first annual Glenwood Auto Gala hosted at Harlow & Co. Dealership, December 23rd, p.m. black tie only. No guests. CAH. Lena snorted. That's not an invite, it's bait. Harriet added. He wants a showdown. On his turf. I looked down at the embossed card. Oh, he'll get one, I said, but not the kind he thinks. For the next 6 days, I made no public moves, no comments, no warnings. But behind closed doors, I called everyone I trusted. Vivian Graves, the journalist who had exposed Clayton's sexism, agreed to attend the gala undercover. She would wear a wire beneath her gown, and if Clayton or any of his men said anything discriminatory, she'd capture it. June Thomas, my rising star in sales, helped organize a surprise announcement to be released the same night as the gala. Something Clayton wouldn't see coming. I even brought back Benjamin Locke, the man who had helped me purchase Harlow Motors in the first place. This time, we weren't buying anything. We were destroying illusions. On December 23rd, I stepped into the Glenwood dealership at exactly 7:01 p.m. wearing a navy blue velvet gown and the same red wool coat from the day I'd first taken over Ironwood. My boots clicked across the marble floor like a countdown. Inside, the scene was dripping with ego. Cigars, aged whiskey, dark suits, and chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a theater, not a business. The room quieted when I entered. Clayton stood near the grand piano, a glass of scotch in one hand and smugness in the other. Well, he called across the room. Look who decided to join the boys. I smiled and walked calmly toward him. Oh, I didn't come for the boys, Clayton. I came for the finale. He raised a brow. You still playing Mechanic Queen down there in Lexington Creek? No, I said. I'm building something that actually serves people. Unlike this parade. He took a sip and leaned in. You can't stop progress, Alison. You can't replace legacy with lipstick. I leaned back with a grin. You're right. Which is why I didn't come to stop anything, I whispered. I came to bury it. At that moment, Benjamin stepped into the room, handed Clayton a sealed envelope. Consider this a professional courtesy, Benjamin said. We've acquired the land 3 miles west of here. You know the old Holloway Motors track? Clayton blinked. That place is condemned. It was, I said, until I bought it. Tomorrow morning, we break ground on the Ironwood Performance Park test tracks, museum showroom, public service garage, and open hiring for all genders. Gasps circled the room, but, Clayton sputtered, the permits, fast-tracked, approved, and sponsored by the very bank that pulled out of your venture last month. His face flushed red, hand trembling around his glass. Then came the final blow. Vivian Graves, wearing a champagne gold dress and heels sharp enough to draw blood, stepped forward, microphone tucked in her purse. She smiled wide. Mind if I ask a few questions, Mr. Harlow? About your hiring policies? He paled. I didn't stay for the crash. I turned, coat flowing behind me, and walked out into the snowy parking lot beneath velvet stars in the distance. I could hear music playing from inside. A waltz, ironic and hollow. Behind me, Clayton's empire began to crumble. In front of me, mine was rising. I drove off in my custom 1967 Ford Galaxy, the same one I had once fixed in the freezing dark behind Ironwood's back lot when no one believed I could. This time, I drove it as a queen. By Christmas Eve morning, it was official. Ironwood Performance Park had been announced across every paper in Virginia, with headlines like, Woman Who Took Down Harlow to Open Landmark Auto Track, the Queen of Chrome. Alison Kate's revolution rolls on, even national outlets picked it up. The photos showed me standing in the snow at the old Holloway Motors lot, holding the signed permits, wearing my red coat and a quiet, satisfied smile. I should have felt invincible, but success, I've learned, has a way of echoing in empty places. That night, after locking up Ironwood's main office, I sat in my truck under the stars and listened to the hum of the engine. I remembered how it all started: the late nights, the grease stains, the ridicule. I remembered my dad, who passed away before he could see this rise. I missed him more than ever. He used to say, "Eli, engines are like people. If you listen close, they'll tell you what's wrong." I wondered what mine would say now. Just then, a knock on the driver's side window jolted me from the memory. It was Lena, bundled in her brown coat and scarf, holding 2 cups of cider. "You looked like you needed this," she said. I took the cup, grateful. "How'd you know I was here?" "June said she saw your truck and figured you weren't celebrating." I smiled faintly. "Guess I've been so busy winning that I forgot how to rest." Lena sat beside me on the tailgate. "You've done more than win. You made a whole new road." We sat in silence, sipping warm cider in the cold. Then she added something that stuck. "You know, people say revenge is about getting even, but I think it's about finally being seen." I turned toward her. "You think I just wanted to be seen?" "No," she said. "I think you wanted to matter. And you do, to all of us." That night, I decided it was time to reopen a box I hadn't touched in years. Back home, I dug through my old cedar chest and pulled out the stack of letters I wrote to my father after he passed. One every Christmas Eve, every year since. But this time, I added a new one. December 24th, 1950. To Dear Dad, they told me I didn't belong. They told me to park outside, so I bought the place. All of it. I wish you could see it, but I think somehow, you always have. Every bolt I turned, every man I proved wrong, every door I kicked open was for girls like me and for the man who believed in me before anyone else did. Thank you. Your daughter, Alison, sealed it and placed it in the wooden drawer where the others lived. The next morning, Christmas Day, I arrived at the dealership early. To my surprise, the showroom lights were already on. Inside, Lena, Maria, June, and even Harriet stood around a long table filled with food. There were pies, biscuits, cider, even a peppermint cake. Someone had strung together an old timing chain into a wreath. Someone else had left a card on my desk, for the one who rewrote the map. "Merry Christmas, boss." I blinked fast. "You all did this?" Maria grinned. "We figured if we're building a new family, we should start with a proper holiday." I had no words, just gratitude. We sat around the table, laughing, eating, telling stories about our worst customers and best engines. Outside, snow fell silently, blanketing the world in peace. And as I looked at them, these women, these warriors, I realized something. I hadn't just gotten revenge, I'd sparked a revolution. Later that afternoon, I took a slow drive through Glenwood County, past the now quiet Harlow & Co., which had gone mysteriously dark. The lights were off, no customers, no music, just a sign flapping loose in the wind. Clayton was nowhere to be seen, and maybe that was fitting. Some men are born to lead, some are born to lie, and some are meant to be left behind. As for me, I returned to Ironwood, parked proudly out front, not in the back, and left the truck engine running, because we weren't done yet. The dealership was closed for the holiday week, but I still came in early every morning. I wasn't good at sitting still, even on days meant for celebration. I'd walk the quiet showroom floors, polish the hoods of our classic models, and listen to the tick of the radiators warming up. It was peaceful until the past knocked at my door. Literally, on the morning of December 27th, just after sunrise, a sharp knock rattled the glass doors at Ironwood. I looked up from my ledger and saw a figure bundled in a trench coat, a newsboy cap pulled low. At first, I thought it might be another reporter or an eager customer who'd missed the close for the holidays sign, but when I opened the door, the cold hit me just as hard as the name that followed. "Ally," he said, his voice low and unmistakable. "It's me, Jesse." I stood frozen in the doorway. Jesse Calhoun, my ex-fiancé, the one who left me on Christmas Eve, 5 years ago, when I was still scraping grease in the back lot of the original dealership. The same Jesse who told me I wasn't polished enough for a man with real ambitions. The same Jesse who had driven away in a Cadillac and never looked back. He looked older now, not worn, but weary, like time had reshaped him. What do You want? I asked, my voice steady but clipped. I heard about everything, he said. The dealership, the track, the paper called you the Queen of Chrome. That's something. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't drive here to compliment me. He exhaled. No, I didn't. He stepped inside slowly, hands in his coat pockets. I came to apologize. I almost laughed. 5 years, Jesse. 5 Christmases. And now, when I'm standing on my own defeat, you walk in with regret? I didn't come to weasel back in, he said quickly. I know what I did. I was a coward. You scared me, Alison. You had dreams I didn't know how to support, and I thought walking away would hurt less than being left behind. I crossed my arms. You didn't give me the chance to leave you behind. You did it first. He nodded slowly. I know, and I'll live with that. I saw the articles. I saw how they talk about you now, and I realized you became everything. You were meant to be, with or without me. There was a long silence. Then he pulled something out of his pocket, a keyring rusted old familiar. I found this cleaning out my mother's garage. It's the spare key to your first truck, the one we used to ride in when we talked about dreams. I thought maybe you'd want it back. He placed it on the counter between us. I looked at it but didn't touch it. You know what, Jesse? I said, voice calm. I do want it back, but not because of you. Because it reminds me of a girl who once thought she needed permission to matter. A girl who stayed small so a man wouldn't feel insecure. His shoulders dropped. I'm not her anymore, I added. And I hope you're not the same either. But this story, this place, this future, it doesn't include you. He blinked, and for once, said nothing, just nodded. Before he walked out, he turned to me one last time. Merry Christmas, Alison. I mean that. Merry Christmas, Jesse. And then he was gone. The wind blew hard outside, dusting the lot with snow again. I picked up the keyring and placed it in my desk drawer, not as a memento of Jesse, but as a reminder of the miles I had walked since. That afternoon, I gathered the Ironwood team for one last meeting of the year. We sat around the service bay, sipping cider, bundled in coats, laughing under the string lights Maria had hung from the rafters. Next year, I said, we open the track. We launch our mentorship program. And maybe, we build a second Ironwood. They cheered. Maria raised a cup. To Alison. I raised mine back. To all the women who were told to park outside, and who now owned the keys. The clink of cider mugs echoed through the bay like bells. I knew Clayton was finished. I knew Jesse was in the rear view. And I knew something else too. I wasn't done rising. Not yet. New Year's Eve came to Lexington Creek with a sky full of heavy snow and a wind that whispered of something ending and something else just beginning. Inside Ironwood Auto, the team was hard at work. Though none of us were selling cars that day, we were setting up the event that would mark a new chapter. Not only for the business, but for every woman who'd ever been told to wait outside. The final event of the year, Drive Her Forward, Gala and Track Fund launch, a fundraiser, a celebration, a statement. People came from everywhere: Richmond, Glenwood, Roanoke, even out-of-state buyers and journalists. Some came because of curiosity, some came because of conviction, but they all came. And I was ready. In the heart of the newly cleared Ironwood Performance Park, with scaffolding set and a massive Coming Spring 1953 banner waving behind us, I stepped onto the stage wearing my father's watch and a silver wrench pendant around my neck. The crowd hushed, cameras flashed, and somewhere in the distance, I thought I could still hear the whisper of a Cadillac's engine pulling away in another lifetime. I took the microphone and looked out at the faces: young girls, tired mothers, aspiring mechanics, silent allies, hardened skeptics. This began, I said slowly, with someone telling me to move my truck. Chuckles rippled through the front rows. They said I didn't belong, that I didn't look the part, that I'd never make it in a man's world. I paused, let that land. But this, I swept my hand to the construction site, the dealership. The women standing proudly behind me, isn't a man's world, it's ours. Every woman who was told to stay quiet, stay out, or stay home. This is for her. The applause began low and grew like a rolling engine. I continued. When I was 27, I thought I had to marry a man to matter. That love meant shrinking. That loyalty meant silence. And when I was left on Christmas Eve with nothing but a set of keys and a broken dream, I thought I'd lost it all. I looked directly into the lens of the nearest camera. I was wrong. More applause, a few hands over hearts, some teary eyes. I didn't lose anything. I shed it, like bad paint off good metal. And underneath, there was a woman who could build an empire out of rust. Cheers now. I raise my hand one last time. So here's my message to anyone who's ever been underestimated. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. Let them tell you to park outside. And then, by the building, Happy New Year. The crowd erupted. Streamers flew. Fireworks lit up the gray sky in flashes of red, gold, and silver. Behind me, Lena and June unveiled the plans for our new scholarship fund for women pursuing careers in automotive repair. We raised $22,000 that night, enough to fund 6 full apprenticeships, and as midnight approached, I stood alone for a moment at the edge of the track site. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but I felt warmer than I had in years. I pulled out the old keyring Jessie had returned, held it in my palm, then I tossed it into the foundation pit where the new garage would rise. Let the past stay buried. I'd forged a new key, one made of grit, grief, and gasoline, one that only I could turn. Reflection as the final fireworks burst behind me and the new year came alive with light and noise, I asked myself the question I wish someone had asked me when this journey began. Was the revenge enough? And the answer? No. Because it was never just about revenge. It was about reclaiming everything they tried to take from me and giving it back to the ones who never got a chance. And now, with the title deed in one hand and the future in the other, I finally parked where I belonged, right in front. Questions for you, reader. Have you ever been underestimated because of who you are? What would you do if someone tried to write you off like Alison? Would you forgive someone like Jessie or toss the key for good? Subscribe to more revenge stories. Share, like, comment.